Welcome to the Microdosing for Healing podcast. I'm your host, Casey Garrett, and together we'll be discovering and learning from inspiring voices of healers, medicine keepers, and visionaries. Every episode, we'll explore the world of health, vibrant wellness, and natural medicine for a new era of human society. Welcome to today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the pod. Great to see you today. I'm really excited for you to meet and introduce you to our guest today. Please meet Emily Knife. I'm going to start off by sharing a little bit of her background. She is the founder of the School of Modern Nursing and a leading voice in innovative nursing education, specializing in wellness, leadership, and entrepreneurship for nurses. A certified somatic coach and intuitive business strategist, Emily's programs blend neuroscience, resilience techniques, and practical business skills, empowering nurses to thrive personally and professionally. She is a sought-after speaker and author with works like Peace, Self-Love, and Nursing, and DBT Workbook, aimed at helping nurses enhance well-being and career satisfaction. Emily's mission is to equip nurses with the tools to achieve balance, financial independence, and a fulfilling career path. Welcome, Emily. Thanks for being with us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, this is so timely, this episode. So right before we were recording, Emily and I, the time we're recording this, we're in such a sea change and such a moment when it comes to the shift in our healing paradigms and models and frameworks. And right now we're seeing such, especially those of us who've been in the field for a long time, we're seeing such an internal seismic shift of professionals, clinicians, nurses, doctors who are leaving the models to break out into new frameworks and models. And I would love, Emily's been at this for a while. Feel free to share your background and what brought you here. But I would love for Emily to share a bit about her work and background and perspective and kind of what has brought us here in this moment and if she is seeing this too. So welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. So if you want to learn more about me, just go to my website or LinkedIn and you can get all the gist and the nitty gritty. But I really wanted to focus on this shift that we're talking about, this paradigm shift. And this shift is so loud. And it's really for a good reason that we're seeing these massive exodus of nurses and doctors from like corporate and insurance-based models just leave. And it's really interesting because we have just historically restricted like practitioners' ability to deliver care. And we are seeing now practitioners noticing that they can be autonomous and that they can start to see patients for more than 15 minutes and actually give the care that they need to. So in my experience, I was just speaking about how I got kicked off of LinkedIn and it was from talking about medication and how we're really overprescribing medication and how there's other ways that we can get through this human experience with the things that the earth has given us. So I'm really excited about this shift. I know that hospitals are not excited about it. I know that the future we're, kind of weary because we're like, well, who's going to be taking care of the sick? But ultimately, what if there wasn't as many sick people? Because we've created a paradigm shift of healing and being well and healthy rather than being in this mode of sick care. So in my experience, I have been the patient ultimately in a lot of mental health facilities as I've had to check myself in before. I've gotten checked in. I've dealt with suicide ideations. And ultimately, the medications that I were on did not help me. They might have helped for a little bit, but they actually caused more problems and pain than I wanted. I was already experiencing severe emotional pain, and that just made it a lot worse. So by the time I was on about 8 medications, psychiatric medications, I was literally a zombie. I dropped out of school. I didn't want to be here anymore. My suicidal ideations got so bad that I withdrew from society and isolated myself. And when that rock bottom hit, I knew that there was another way, like from the universe, from God, source. It was like, came into my mind, like, Emily, there is another way. And I was like, what? What? Okay. And someone came into my life and they shared cannabis with me. And they're like, maybe this will help with your emotional dysregulation. Maybe just try a little bit and see what works. And I was like, sure, I'm up for anything at this point because I'm so much pain that I literally just don't want to be here anymore. And so I started kind of dabbling in the cannabis world. And then ultimately that gateway drug led me into learning more about other plants. And so, yeah, so I'm excited. I know I've been through the ringer, and I know so many nurses and humans in general have been through our sick care system and want something else. So I'm so excited to be here today speaking about the shift that we're seeing. It's we're feeding a broken profit first model. And, really ultimately these professionals are saying, hey, we're not machines. We're here to heal and we're here to help people. And that we ultimately, all of us that are kind of getting away from healthcare, ultimately, we just have this desire to bring humanity back into healthcare. And from my vantage point of what I'm seeing, I really believe this movement is huge. It's upcoming for sure.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. So one of the frictions I see in folks leaving the field is when you're coming from a clinical background or academia or a corporate background, it's very daunting to kind of be out on your own because a lot of it aren't equipped to do kind of the entrepreneurship side of things. Is when you leave that structured, bureaucratic, this is the way things are done. The freedom is a breath of fresh air, but it's also can be really daunting because you're running a business in addition to. So I would love for you to talk about that leap, when you made that leap by choice or not by choice, right? When your destiny led you there, like talk about that, like kind of making that leap and what people really need to help them take that step.
Yeah. I don't know if it was so much of a leap or getting pushed off without a bungee cord.
I relate.
Because, there's a lot of fear that comes with that. And like you were talking about, we've been told by others what we should be doing in our jobs for so long. And when you step out of that spot where nobody's telling you what to do anymore, you're like, what do I do? And who's going to tell me what to do? And it's like, it's very daunting. Absolutely. And so I've always been one to not want to work 40 hours a week. Like that's always not been a thing with me, because it's directly related to my mental health. When I did work bedside, when I worked in the hospitals, my mental health was horrendous. I was mean to everybody. I was an angry person. I was drinking a lot. I was using cannabis unconsciously. I was impulsively taking really bad risks that people shouldn't be doing, right? And so I started noticing these trends within me, like if I work this amount, if I work in this type of environment, this is the result, and these are the symptomologies that I'm having. And it didn't sync well with my soul. And so throughout my nursing career, when I started in 2013, I would work somewhere for about a year and then quit because I'm like, I don't like this. It's like just not fulfilling my soul. And I would feel viscerally sick, like after working, or even during the day, I would feel so anxious and like, I don't want to be here. Right. And so this went through home health, hospice, case management, an integrated pediatric office. Actually, I stayed there quite a while because they were very holistic, and hospice as well. And then throughout that time, I taught in academia part-time. And so it was really interesting seeing real world nursing and then seeing what was being taught in nursing school. It doesn't match. And so my soul just started to hurt for nursing, and the medical world and healthcare. And I've always been trying to figure out ways how to not work 40 hours a week, how to not trade my time for money, and how to actually get paid my worth. And so those three things sent me on this journey to jump off of a cliff, actually get pushed off of a cliff. And my final straw was when I recently left academia. I was working for a big box university, great research hospital, great mission, but the academics were lacking. This is not 1942 anymore. And so I had to get out. And so I was ultimately kind of pushed out the door by means of bullying, And I was like, what? No, like you can't tell me my ideas are stupid. I'm leaving. So, I think that all being said, I think the first thing is realizing that you need to do something else. And if you feel that burning within you, which usually comes, and sometimes we try to push it away with drinking or getting another degree or another certification, but ultimately, like, hear that voice, and that voice will just keep getting louder until you do something about it. So, first, recognize that voice inside of you that wants something better or more for you, and then hire somebody that can help you do that, that's already doing that thing, right? So I have a lot of somatic nurse coaches that are like, I want to do what you're doing. And I was like, okay, well, let's set up a time and talk and mentor and take my course, right? So, I think there's tons of nurses out there right now that are doing super cool things. So really just start your search, right? Start searching for the people that are doing what you want to do, and build your top 5 people that you're around with people that are doing things that your future self want to do. And then, get pushed off or take the leap, right? So, I think that's the biggest things of starting out. And, don't just quit your job. Like, I've been doing this 13 years, part-time, full-time, taking on PRN jobs, like to fund my vision, fund my passions, right? So don't just be like, hey, peace out, hospital. And then you go home and you're like, oh shit, I am broke, right? And then you're like scrambling to figure out, you're like, I'm just going to go work as a florist. That was my experience. I'm like, I'm just going to work as a florist and put flowers in a vase. And that's not quite how it goes. So if you're scared, do it. That's what I have to say.
Excellent. And so it's truthy advice. I love it. I love it. And I love the advice to not pressure yourself into thinking that you need to do it all at once. And to get help along the way. That's so important because, as you said, a lot of people do that and they don't realize that the difference in being an entrepreneur is so great. And so it's totally fair. I oftentimes, when I'm coaching people, I'm like, treat your job as your first investor.
Yeah,
it's just investing the investor in your new life, right? Yes. One that you can count on, and doesn't ask for interest.
Yes, right? I love that mindset shift. Yeah, that's a huge mindset shift because I think a lot of nurses are just like biting away at the bit and really trying to figure out how to exit bedside or how to maybe just reduce their bedside hours, because bedside's horrendous. So even working 36 hours, it's not really 36, it's like 72. If you really truly look at the stress load that the nurses are carrying, I mean, you can double that or triple that by what that looks like an hour, right? And they're only getting paid like 40 to 60 an hour, depending on where you work, so it's like, I think the mindset shift is a huge piece of the entrepreneurship, and also shifting your mindset into opening your mind to collaborating. I have so many nurses that come into this space or message me and they're like, I have, I have women wounds. I have wounds. And I'm just like, okay, that's great that you have all these things, but we in this space want to help you and we want to support you. And so stop saying you have wounds and wounds and wounds and just accept that people want to actually help you and see you succeed, where we don't really see that traditionally in the hospital or academic or corporate setting.
Right right on. Yes. Love it. Yeah. I would love to ask you, because you've been inside the hospital setting, you've been inside academia, and there's so much resistance. I had what you shared, a very similar experience when I had a seizure disorder and I was medicated, even though they couldn't find a cause, the answer was medication. And whenever I brought up the idea or thought of tapering, I was met with such fear, such condescension. And so I really, really understand that's what I hear across the board from people in our intake forms when people bring it to me and they're like, well, I'm scared to go off because whenever I've brought it up, I've gotten so much pushback. And so we know the obvious answer is profit is behind that. But also, can you talk about what you've seen? Like, what is the resistance, in our traditional models, in the medical system, in the insurance system, in academia, of why there is so much resistance against exploring natural options? Like, where is that coming from?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this topic really grinds my gears just because, and if anybody's a Family Guy, that's a Family Guy reference. But it really does because patients specifically and clients tell me time and time again that their prescriber never even warned them about like the drug side effects or even that they're highly addictive, especially some of these psych meds that we're seeing. But even more alarming than that, that these patients are later made to feel that any struggle with withdrawal is proof that they need the drug to begin with, right? So, this is not only dismissive, but it's just downright negligent on the prescriber side, but also just in the collective situation of healthcare, of sick care, right? So, how did we get this way? Well, the system was designed this way, right? Big Pharma spends billions of dollars on marketing, far more than on actual research, by the way. So that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, that they spend billions of dollars in marketing to brainwash people rather than research. So that's kind of interesting and a cool little fact. You can fact check that if you want, but doctors are under time constraints and pressured by insurance mandates that they may overlook really the need for patient education in their prescribing practices. So Rockefeller started this a long time ago, and they set up a great business module. And with that being said, they create chaos to create a cure. So if you look in, the DSM-5, the psychiatric manual that providers use in order to diagnose mental health disorders, back in like 1954, there was only like 100 diagnoses in there. Now there's like 400 to 500 diagnoses in there. So take a moment to digest that, right? So it's not that there are actual problems, that we are actual problems or that we have actual problems. But if you go in to see a doctor, they're going to say, you have headaches, you have reoccurring thoughts of suicide, you have this, you have that. This equals this, right? It's like an Excel spreadsheet. You put in the symptoms and it's going to spit out the formula, and it's going to be like, Google said you have bipolar disorder, right? And so then the doctor is going to write a script and then send you on your way. And a lot of the times, if you look at those pamphlets in the medications, holy hell, it's crazy the amount of side effects, the amount of adverse effects. And doctors don't usually say much about that, and they usually point to the pharmacist like, hey, ask your pharmacist about it. And so it's a huge disconnection amongst pharmacy, amongst doctors, amongst specialists, right? And I think that's why specialists were created, because then you have ultimately a larger business module, because we just looked at the family doctor, right? Back in the early 1900s up to about 1950, 1955, when the Rockefellers really started to invest in business models of Big Pharma and the government, we just saw family doctors. You might have yourself seen a family doctor when you were younger for everything, right? And that was even from like kids to age 120, right? From even babies. And so specialties were created so they could amplify their profits, because ultimately doctors are trained in their specialty, but it ultimately comes back to the nervous system. And so really any disease or disorder, it comes back to the nervous system. And so it's a great business model. I mean, I'm trying to emulate that business model in my business because it works, but I'm not handing out pills, right? I'm handing out cures. So yeah, it's really a fuckery, to be quite honest with you. And as long as they're at the top, as long as Big Pharma and government are at the top, which I think forever they will be, unfortunately, they are a huge billion dollar business. And all we can do as providers in healing is share our stories, give as much information as we can, and see as many people as we can, and send them on their way to then have that ripple effect of wellness. So yeah, that was a little bit about what grinds my gears.
I love it. So beautifully said. Yeah. Thank you. One of the
Yeah.
things I had the opportunity to be at a dinner with many psychiatrists.
Nice.
And it was fascinating hearing from them. They were well aware that medications that are widely prescribed were only ever approved for a very short-term specific use. So, for example, I learned that Ambien was really designed not to be used for more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I cannot
Crazy.
tell you how many applications I have seen or intakes I've done with people who have been on sleeping medications for years, decades, even sometimes. And so I'm curious how, from a clinician standpoint, is how do we keep prescribing things that were never approved? Like, how did it get to that point where we can just prescribe sleeping pills or certain antidepressants that were never approved for use for more than 2 years?
Yeah.
Yet
Yeah.
people are on for decades at a time. So I would love for you to speak to that, because that is definitely not, patients are not informed of that at the time they're prescribed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're not informed of side effects. They're not informed of the longevity of the medication themselves, or even the cost that's going to cost them over, I mean, like you said, years. People have been on Lexapro, Wellbutrin for like 20 plus years. I mean, I have family members that I've talked to, and they're just so scared to get off of these medications, even though they're at like 20 milligrams or 10, they're at a real low dose. It's like we're going to keep you on this dose to keep you a customer kind of. It's like a low subscription deal. You pay $30 every month, get your pills, come back and see us, we'll see you for 15 minutes, give you another piece of paper, right? So patients are not educated, because if they were, they probably wouldn't come back to see their doctor again. And what does that do? It decreases the money that Big Pharma is going to receive, that the insurance companies are going to receive. And, this is a statistic that will probably floor you, but women are prescribed antidepressants about twice the rate of men. But if we dig deeper into this, it's often due to symptoms that the women might be experiencing, such as stress, hormonal changes, or even emotional health. And really, their first response is usually a prescription. And even antidepressants are not supposed to be used more than 6 months to a year. I think it started off at 3, and then they just moved it to about 6 months, right? Because antidepressants are supposed to be prescribed when you've just experienced a really traumatic event, or you're not feeling so right. Right. And so I think even the term depression really kind of gets to me, because if we look back like centuries ago, like tribes and back in the day, right, when we were farming and things like that, it wasn't called depression. It was called compression. And compression gives us a time to ultimately take a moment and be like, where am I in my life? What do I actually need to do to move to the next steps? In this time of rest and compression, I need to make my next moves. But that's not how it's viewed here in the United States, or even really around the world. Depression is looked at like this, ultimately, like, I'm so sorry you're sad. I'm so sorry you're going through something. And I'm not trying to demote or defy anybody's depression experience. But as somebody that was diagnosed as chronically depressed, I'm here to tell you that you can undiagnose yourself from depression. Like, it's literally a mindset issue, and it's a serotonin problem, which is in your gut. And if you're eating the standard American diet, which spells sad, there's your answer. So, ultimately people are just not educated. And so I tell my clients and patients, like, if a prescriber prescribes you something, I want you to take that script, and then I want you to go on the Google, and I want you to learn everything about that medication before you go to the pharmacy and ultimately possibly get on a substance that you're going to be on for years, because it has addictive chemicals in that substance. Yes, it might help your brain, but antidepressants, actually, there's not any actually clarifying research that it actually helps depression. So we're just going to throw that out there too. And when I told nursing students that, the professors looked at me and like, oh my God, I can't believe she just said that. Right. So that's another problem with the academia, the healthcare system. professionals in healthcare are just not being taught the parameters of these medications either. We're not taught in nursing school how long a drug is supposed to be prescribed for. We're just told, like, you have depression, here's a Lexapro. Then learn the side effects of Lexapro, learn that in 4 to 6 weeks you could potentially kill yourself, and then be on your way, right? And sometimes it comes down to nurses educating patients, but then ultimately nurses have zero time to do that anymore, because we're trying to emulate this module of business and get people in and out as quick as we can. I mean, that's why we induce labors, which is why we have such a problem with women's laboring and ultimately the demise of women, mother and child, right? Because we're pushing things when we should let the body naturally do its thing. So, yeah, I mean, it really comes down to education and, what healthcare professionals are being taught. Yeah.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. All of it. All of it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
All of it. And I think it's so important what you touched on, the fact that a lot of people go on, I mean, the vast majority of people I know that I have spoken to, when we kind of peel back as to like, when did you originally go on this medication? Mm-hmm. And they can pinpoint it. They can say, I was going through a breakup. I had just lost my pet. Was going through this rupture in my life for a short time, but very quickly they develop this mentality that they are a depressed person. Something is wrong with them. And then if and when they ever come off, the side effects and withdrawal are seen as proof that there's something wrong with them, right? Yes. And so it puts them into this cycle. And so when you are deprescribing or coming off or contemplating it, it's really important to understand, to grow out of that diagnosis mentality that this is connected to you. And it's such a disempowering model to be placed when simply you're just being human a lot of times. Yeah.
Because it's like, there's probably really nothing wrong with you, but they're going to find it. They'll find something. Like, I can be the ultimately healthiest person on this world and go see a doctor. They will find one thing at least, just so they can put that ICD-10 code down, get reimbursed by their insurance, and then prescribe you some sort of medication. So, and it might be my thinking about 40-hour work weeks is not conducive to me. They might be like, there is something wrong with you.
Right.
We need to give you a Xanax so you can actually go do your 40-hour a week. And that, my friends, is America in general. We have so many people on antidepressants and anti-anxiety just so they can go work for 40 hours a week. Like, they're giving their lives away and they're just becoming robots. And it hurts my heart. I almost left nursing last year. I almost did not renew my license just because of the amount of dysfunction in sick care. So, So thank you for having me on. I'm just so excited, like all the things you're doing. And it's quite the journey, right?
I appreciate it so much, so much. Another big thorny one for folks that I have seen, particularly nurses and healers, is money. And it's so tied to everything because, as you just said, part of the great dysfunction is trying to jam healing into these franchisee corporate scale volume models. And really, people heal by intimacy and slowness and less. I mean, almost every healer I've worked with, thousands and thousands of healers in my life, and no matter what the discipline is, the sweet spot is usually around 3 or 4 clients a day, no matter what they're doing, or whether it's therapists or nursing or massage therapists. It's like 3 or 4 clients is sustainable for me energetically. Yeah. And I can still work from a place of fullness and be totally present for my clients and not overwhelmed. But the rub is you have to charge more. You have to charge more for your services and create new business models than this trading hour for a low cost amount of time. And it hits a spot in people because it's the money rub of you can't be a healer and be well-resourced at the same time, right? And that's more of the brainwashing and the conditioning that we have received, particularly as women in the field. So when you're working with nurses in particular who come in with this edge, right, about earning money, what do you say to them? What kind of advice and guidance do you give them?
Yeah, yeah. So that's a great question. It's a super common question I get from a lot of nurses, whether it's on LinkedIn or social. And ultimately, first, like we've talked about, is changing your mindset. So maybe adding some affirmations, like looking yourself in the mirror and being like, I am worth billions of dollars. My worth doesn't, is not conducive to my hourly rate, right? So, in the Undiagnose Yourself Academy, that is my other business that I serve all humans. We do a lot of mindset shifting. And I think that is the first part, is just realizing like there's another way to think, and it's okay to think a different way. So I really show them a model of business that brings in various income sources. So I'm a doctorate dropout 3 times now. And every time that I dropped out of doctorate school, I invested in myself. So I hired coaches, I hired business marketing consultants to teach me how to actually make money, because you're not taught that in nursing school. You're not taught that in any certification that you get in nursing, or really even teaching for that matter. Teachers and nurses are both very similar. We work really crazy hours. We never get to pee. We have students that have issues. We have patients that have issues, right? Teachers and nurses are like one. And I work with a lot of teachers, and they themselves are like, how do I get out of education? Right. And so setting up a business model that releases you from doing a lot of one-on-ones, because traditionally nurse coaches, if you look a lot of the curriculum out there, there's several great programs out there, but they are surely focused on a lot of one-on-ones. And so a lot of nurse coaches are kind of stepping away from that because they're like, well, I can't make money. Like you're saying, like, I can't make money doing this, but it's because they don't have the education of how to market, how to set up a membership, how to set up communities, how to set up reoccurring passive income like courses, books. You can put books on Amazon, right? You can be an affiliate. So in reality, it's having multiple income sources. And traditionally, we're not used to hearing that. We're taught in our education from a very young age, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I didn't want to be a nurse. I don't even, I wanted to be a coroner for a really long time because dead people don't talk back to you. But, you know, um, it's really interesting that we're so focused on this like one goal, when if you look at the mindset and the strategies that millionaires take, they have multiple income streams and they don't work a lot. Really, they don't work like 40, 60 hours a week because they have income that's just coming in. And so ultimately, when I started learning about this and started seeing that money was coming into my box, like when I'm sleeping in my bed or when I was teaching at that big box university, and I got an announcement on my phone. It's like, you just got $555. And I was like, how in the hell did I do that? And it was for my microdosing certification course. And I was like, oh my God, I just made what I make here, like literally like that. And that's when my mindset started to shift from, I am not my hourly pay, I am my universal energetic frequency. And so if I'm putting a lot of good stuff into the universe and into the world, the human conscious, I start reaping the rewards of that, right? And I constantly say throughout the day, like, I am a money magnet. Money is always coming in for me. Money works for me. I love money. And so saying those things really shifts your mindset, and money just starts coming in. It's really bizarre. It's ultimately the most bizarre thing I've ever experienced in my life, because I have traded my time for money for so long. And so when these things started to trickle in, I became more engaged in affiliates and how to market that out. And, I rep a bunch of different supplement companies. And so I just get checks every month from commissions because somebody saw my post on Pinterest that I put up a year ago and my affiliate links on there. So it's, my business model and how I teach it to nurses is, I want you to be a millionaire because I know ultimately that you were born wealthy, healthy, and happy, and you can get to that place again. You just have to really dissolve the brainwashing that we've been like given throughout our whole lifetime. If you look at most millionaires don't go to college. They've actually dropped out of high school. And I think, the higher you kind of climb up in the education or academic realm, the more tunnel vision you have. And so a lot of the people that I work with that are doctorates, CEOs, DNPs of that nature, it's like they've become even more brainwashed. And it takes a little bit more modeling and kind of sculpting of themselves to believe in that system of, I don't have to be a director of education or a director of nursing getting paid 100 grand a year when I can be less stressed and do things I love. And so, yeah, it's a very like, it's a weird mindset shift. But yeah, I think ultimately it's realizing that your worth isn't an hourly pay, which has always been so mind boggling to me. I'm like, how is that even a thing? Like, we are the only like beings on this earth that like have to get paid to work, and we have to pay for shit. Like, animals are just running around freely. I mean, I have dogs and cats and they get served all the time and they don't have to work or anything, right? So it's like there's just like this weird human consciousness shift that we have to have ultimately in order to get paid as like artists, right? Because healers are artists, and artists have always had a bad rap. Like, you're not, my dad even told me, he's like, you're not going to make money with an art degree. And I'm like, okay, dad, so, but you can. It's all about how you market yourself and the business model that you're going to use to ultimately make passive income and create that freedom that you ultimately want. So, yeah.
I love it. We're in such an exciting moment. And I think especially for young people who are listening right now, who want to be of service, are the part of the caring force of tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's not like we're in a moment where I know when I talk to older, people with the MBAs, the Harvard MBAs, and I talk to them about my business model, they're just like, their mind is blown. They just don't conceive of doing things that way. And so it's really important to be with people who, as you said, are doing what you want to do, and also who aren't doing it the way things have always been done. I mean, to me, it's like one of the last people. I remember when I was starting out many, many years ago, I was maybe 20, and I was sent to a mentorship course with an established business professional, with an MBA to learn from. Yeah. And I remember them telling me their advice was I shouldn't take credit cards because they're not secure. And I was like, right. I probably shouldn't be listening to that advice.
Like, was this a drug dealer? Maybe?
And I probably shouldn't be listening to any of their other advice either. Yeah. And so it's novel to be, listening and taking, coaching and business guidance from a younger person, or, a person that doesn't look like the business person, right? Yes. But I think it's so vital that we do that now, because we're not going to, we're forging so many different paths right now. And so it's kind of the time of the outlier. I think it's better to learn from the outliers than it is to learn from the status quo right now. So thank you for speaking to that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. My next question is around moving the culture from one of distraction and numbing to really holding out, having clean energy and clear energy. And I see this happening quietly in the underground right now, bubbling up. I see it in my intakes. I see it on my applications that people really aren't just wanting to solve a problem anymore. They want more than that. Like they want to set a higher bar. And so I'm curious to see your reflections to that. And if that is where we're going, it changes everything, right? It changes the models, it changes the goal, it changes what we hold out for people in terms of what's possible for them. So I'd love to get your reflections on that shift.
Yeah. And I think that shift really comes from, like you said, people, I think it's 88 to 92%, can fact check me on this. But it's, people are ultimately wanting complementary alternative medicine options. And so if that huge percentage is constantly going into doctors' offices and saying they want something different, but the doctor's just really not educated in that area. So for instance, like psychedelics, a lot of the clients that I have, or even nurses that I have that come into the somatic nurse coach certification program, they have asked their doctor that they want something different, or can they get support, or can they get resources for psychedelics, for cannabis, for natural modalities. And usually the doctor shuts them down. And it usually comes from a place of just not being educated in that area, because unfortunately our medical system, our medical academia does a super large disservice into the area of plant medicine, of natural modalities, of CAM, of all the things that really help us to actually get better and heal from the different things that we're having in our human experience. And so, I think I would like to imagine a world if healthcare wasn't just about masking symptoms, like we ultimately do, whether it's with medication or excessive alcohol use, excessive exercise, excessive spending, excessive relationships, excessive degrees, excessive certifications. It's like all these things we use to numb ourselves so we don't have to deal with the present moment. And that's why I think there's a huge shift that we're seeing with psychedelics. Because in my experience and in others' experience that I've worked with in retreat settings that have ultimately never used that type of medicine guide, they come out on the other side a whole nother person, and they realize so many things that they were doing in their current life that was really, really hurting them, ultimately hurting them, and killing them, So, I think as we start to see the shift of more people being accepting, I'm working with several collaborators right now in getting that information to medical universities and research hospitals, and presenting in front of doctors and being like, look, these are all the awesome psychedelics that we have. But these are all the awesome things that can happen. And these are all the bad things that can happen, and all the things that in between, that if you give this resource to your patients, they can go make decisions for themselves, because our model right now, we don't give any autonomy to patients whatsoever. We are guiding you through a trail. We're hiking you. We're going to guide you. And if you don't show up to your doctor's appointment, we're going to call you and make sure you come back. Right. And so when we're dealing with a psychedelic journey, it's such a beautiful journey of integration, of self-awareness, of tapping into one's consciousness. It gives me the shivers just even talking about it, because I know that it can be so life-changing, and has been for so many people for centuries. I mean, like the Mayans used to use this shit, right? So like, we don't need any more research. We know it works. Like, why do we keep researching the shit out of all these different psychedelics? Like, why don't you just go ask a human that has experienced that psychedelic, and then get their actual human experience, take that information, and then bring it back and share it, right? We've gotten so far and deep into like, we need this science, we need this research, when it's like, no, just go try it and see how it works for you. Just like we do for all pharmaceuticals, right? Somebody that has depression might be on like 8 different pharmaceuticals just to figure out which one works. No, like, and it's the same with psychedelics. But yeah, I think as we see the shift, more and more doctors leaving because of the model, the insurance-based model, but they're tapping into psychedelics. I'm seeing I've gotten so many messages. I just started a new LinkedIn account. I got 5 messages from doctors that are actually getting out of the medical system. And they're like, how do you do this? How can I be a part of it? What does this look like? So I think it just comes down to, our medical professionals are not educated. And when one speaks up in an academic setting to train individuals on that, we are really silenced, and we're shut down for being outcast, for not staying in our lane, or, whatever we want to be identified as. But, being in those places made me realize that the education is very lacking. So yeah, so from you, from me, from all the people that are in the psychedelic space and providing education, I think there will be a change. I mean, I think all of our politicians need a little education too. You know, it's like we should be teaching this we wouldn't have such a bad drug problem if we actually taught this stuff in school, right? I was like a winner of DARE, the DARE program back in the day. Like in third grade, I won an essay contest about drugs. And I'm like, I use all these cool drugs now. And it's just really interesting. It's like we push it so far away from people and ultimately make it this like horrible bad thing. And you're gonna go in a K-hole and it's gonna go dark. Like, yeah, that shit can go wrong on Lexapro, man. Like, forget about microdosing. You're not going to feel a thing, but you will have more patience. You'll be better with your kids. You'll probably become so aware to the fact that the hospital system you're working for is so toxic, and that you'll become aware of your actual visceral symptoms that you're experiencing, that you'll be like, oh my God, I cannot do this anymore. And that's kind of what happened to me. So yeah, that was a lot for that question, but yeah, it's it's an interesting time we're in, and it's weird. Like I love talking about psychedelics and cannabis, but there might be people out there that don't want to hear it because they've had one bad experience. But I often see with patients, they'll have one experience with a drug and it might be bad, and they'll go back to that same doctor and be like, hey doc, this medication didn't work for me. What else can you get? What else can I get? Right. And so that, it's really concerning that we just keep returning to the same person that's hurting us. It's like a weird narcissistic relationship with healthcare, sick care, I mean. So,
yeah. Oh, so rich. All of it. All of it. So appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I have the opportunity, as you do, to talk to a lot of beginner audiences, which is so fun. And people, in my case, it's people who have like just heard of microdosing, but really don't know much more about it. And it's very, very common before a talk, when I'm scripting it and talking to the organizer about what are they most interested in learning about, we usually start off with, well, let's talk about, the science and the research. And I'll say, is that what is really meaningful to them? And they'll say, no, actually, no.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's so much conditioning that we need the proof that something works.
Yes.
So I love that. It's a very, very powerful point you made. Yes. And I started noticing a huge sea change about 2 years ago I used to see clinicians and doctors kind of casing around the outside, they check out the website and they're like, see what's going on. But all of a sudden, a couple of years ago, I started seeing applications from them. Wow. And when I asked them, what was the change? Like, you've been checking it out for a while. Like what made you step in now?
Yeah.
And they said it was driven by their clients and their patients. They said it was just, they kept coming in and asking me for it. And they would say, I probably need it for myself. I'm feeling pretty burnt out and depleted and want the support for myself. But also I feel like I'm at the point where to be the healer I need to educate myself and to have an embodied experience in the practice so that I know who it's right for. And it was a beautiful moment that this is huge right now. I had another question for you. I've been working in the healing arts for many, many decades now. And it's always been interesting to me how many healers, how many nurses, how many psychotherapists, how many physicians are also on a lot of medications. And to me, one of the things that I have seen is to be really a great guide and space holder and supporter of people. Your own energy needs to be as clean and clear as it can be. You need to have your empathy dialed all the way up on high, and to be on so many medications, it's been interesting to see, our empathy is so important, but it's been scientifically shown in research that antidepressants blunt our ability to feel empathy.
Yes.
And so I'd love for you to speak to this and to see, you've seen people move through this process. I see so many people right now wanting to develop a strong spiritual connection, a relationship with themselves. And that's part of it, is to really develop a clarity in
Yeah.
your energetic field. So I'd
Yes.
love to open the floor for you to talk about that.
Yes, I love this topic of energetics. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about because our own energy is so important. And so if you think of it like this, so a lot of people I talk to, and especially when I was teaching this in nursing school, it was like, no, no, you're the devil. Stop talking. We're not energy. And it's like, wait, you have a doctorate in nursing and you're telling me we're not energy when the SA node is an electrical impulse to get our heart going? Wait, what? Our nervous system is electric, right? So you touch something and that static electricity gets you. That's because your energy, love, right? So um, that's why I love talking about it, because it's so like taboo, but it's really not. And when we start tapping into understanding our energy, we really can make shit happen. And if you think about it, let's just take a moment to envision ourselves going into a funeral. So if you've ever been to a funeral, just take a moment and think about the energy that is in that space. It's probably going to be very drab and dark and sad and very low. It's a very low energy. And you can even tell my tone and how slow I'm talking. The energy is really low in there, right? But if we think about shifting our energy and think about a wedding or a party or a celebration, that is really high energy. I'm going to raise my tone here. Super high energy. I'm going to talk a little faster, right? Because I'm this energy, right? And you might even be able to feel it on the other end, this energetic kind of projection that I'm giving you energy right now. I'm giving you energy. So you might even feel like, wow, I'm actually feeling energized because I'm ultimately giving you energy through this podcast, through this videoing. And so energy is so important. And as a healer, we can get very displaced in our energy. And when we're on a lot of medications, it ruins our frequency, it ruins our aura and our energetic being. It almost like fragments it. So, say you take, if you look at a mirror, that's somebody, the mirror is nice and clean, it doesn't have any cracks or anything in the mirror. That's somebody that has really good frequency, really good energy. They're mostly positive to be around. They want the best for you. Now take a stone to that, let's just name that society, and throw it at that person, the mirror, and now it's just shattered into pieces. And ultimately, that's kind of what happens when we start taking on more and more medications. One kind of frazzles it a little bit, but most adults are on about 2 to 3 medications here in the United States. So with that energetic concept, it's really important as a healer, as a healthcare professional, to do some work with your energy. So I always tell nurses, the first thing you do when you wake up, you notice your state. Notice like your energetic state, notice where your mind's going, notice who you are in that moment, because the rest of the day when you see your 15 to 30 patients, your energetic states are going to change with every single patient. So if you just had a patient when you just walked in onto the floor and you came in all happy and zippy and ready to get to work, and you have a patient and the first thing they say to you is like, I want to kill myself. And you're like, oh shit, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. That energy from that statement is going to drop your energy. I promise you it will, because you're like, oh my God, there's somebody in front of me that wants to die right now. Right. So ultimately, it's setting up barricades or blockages to block off other people's energy. And how we do this is ultimately crossing over the midline. And so our midline, when we're like this, we're open to any sort of energy. We're like, I'll take on any energy when we're like this. But as providers and healthcare and healers, we should protect our energy. And ways to do this is just ultimately crossing at the midline. So you can just like set your arms on your lap or on the table, right? You're not like this. This is like defensive mode. You're not listening, but just crossing at the midline. You can also cross your legs gently to also seal that midline, because we're energetic beings. And so, today and this week, just take notice of how people affect you. I always say you're like the top 5 people that you hang out with. And I had to do a huge divorcing pretty recently with a lot of different people because I'm like, you, this is not working anymore for me, right? This is bringing me way low and I want to be up here and y'all are bringing me down here. And that can be relationships, that can be job, that can be friendships even. You know, some people have been friends for 20 years. That person is just word vomiting all over you all the time. Or is it a give and a take or is it just like all you, right? So, you know, energy comes in every single day, every single second of the day, and you can manipulate your own energy. And I learned this when I learned that I was actually in charge of my emotions in dialectical behavior therapy that I did. It was an outpatient setting. Um, and ultimately, when I was like, oh my God, I have the power to change my emotions, and emotions are energy, emotion, right? So when we experience an emotion, we can either react or respond to that emotion and either give it energy or not give it energy. So if a thought comes into my mind that, like, I'm so sad that I got an F on my pharm test, maybe I'm a nursing student, I just lowered my energy, right? But if I change that narrative and say, that was my first pharm test. I did get a 69, but that's okay because I have 5 other pharm tests this term and I'm just going to knock it out of the water. I'm so excited to take this test, right? So I just raise my energy up, right? So we are constantly doing this with the words we speak to ourselves. And when I learned this to get out of this negative thinking pattern that we are just, it's just ingrained into us. It's a negative bias that we have as humans. When I started getting out of that framework, I started to undiagnose myself from borderline personality disorder, bipolar, anxiety, depression, PTSD, all these things that I was identifying with. And when I started to like unidentify with these things, I was like, oh my God, it's Emily. I'm a human. I'm so excited to be here. Right. So yeah, I love it. I love talking about energy just because it's something that I mean, like kids should learn this in school. We probably wouldn't have as many fights if we learned about energy. And that's why I teach that at the School of Modern Nursing. We really teach a lot in the somatic nursing course about energetics and your energy. And like how you said, like showing up, right? If I have a frazzled patient and I'm really frazzled, and then I move into the next patient room and I get in there and I'm like, oh my God, so sorry, Mrs. Jones. I just had a person. They were having a heart attack. I had to call 911. This is crazy. Ooh, that patient's going to be like, what the fuck? They might get up and walk out, right? Because you've just brought that person's problems onto that patient, and that patient already has their own problems. So you're just transferring energy all day long. And you'll find those people out in society. You might even have them in your family or in your friend circle that it's just constant like drama, right? You know, I see this, my daughter's in middle school. So I see this, it's like they feed off of that drama, you know, and it's that energy. It's that energy that they're sharing, right? So yeah, so I think, you know, tapping into psychedelics really, really brings empathy to like a forefront. And I think sometimes that scares a lot of people because they're like, oh my God, I'm actually feeling things and I don't want to feel. And sometimes they'll get off of the psychedelics because like, oh my God, I don't want to feel because I haven't been feeling for 40 years. And this is really foreign for me. And I don't know, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I think even the psychedelics change your energy, right? It like opens up our heart centers to be more compassionate, more empathetic. I know I'm way more patient with my kids. Stuff that used to bother me, I'm just like, oh my gosh, let's go do something else, guys. Come on. Right. You know, I don't yell anymore. I used to be such an angry person when I was on a lot of medication. And now I'm just like I'm just excited to be here. I think because I've had so many times where I wanted to die or where I tried to kill myself that now I'm just like, no, I just want to live. Like, and I think psychedelics has really brought that to the forefront for me and helped quiet those negative statements that I was telling myself for 40 years, right? So, yeah, so energy is so important. Yeah, and come learn more at the School of Modern Nursing about energy.
Appreciate you so, so much. Yeah, it's so deeply empowering. And one of the things I love witnessing in our microdosing community is a lot of the people who often were medicated because of their sensitivity,
Yes.
because of their energetic
Yeah.
openness. And what they come to realize is as they step into it, and instead of medicating for it, actually lean into it and
Mm,
embrace it, those
yeah.
turn into incredible spiritual gifts that other people don't have. Gifts of
Yes.
intuition, gifts of sensitivity, gifts of knowing what people are going to say before they say them,
Yeah.
being able to move through the world in a different way of flow than they had. And they've always had it. They
Yeah.
just had to
Yeah.
kind of see the same thing from a different lens. And psychedelics is what allows them to see that greater perspective. Yeah, beautiful. So, in closing,
Yeah.
I love to ask all of my guests suspend reality, especially right now, and all barriers, all restrictions, all, police of social media, and imagine a future where earth medicines, plant medicines are readily accessible to people. How do you envision a society incorporating medicine practice and a future of healing models that are most effective, accessible, and available to people?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah. What would the world look like? I think there'd be a lot more hugs. I literally think like
Uh,
people, like I know when I dabble in that area of plant medicine, like I just want to walk around, like I walk around the grocery store and I'm like, oh my God, that person, I just want to hug them right now. Like it's so funny, um, but that's what happens, you know. I think it breaks down our barriers of what we've been taught, our limitations, right? So I think if we did have a society that plant medicine was readily available, that people could maybe walk into a dispensary of some sort or a clinic and get treated for the root cause rather than the symptomology. I think we would have a healthcare system and it wouldn't be a sick care system anymore. I think we would see big pharma crumble, which would be really cool. I've always had this love and hate relationship with big pharma, but being in the sick care industry, I've seen it do more harm than good. And that's including oncology, that's including labor and delivery, that's including hospice. I mean, it's across the board, the places that I've worked. But ultimately, it would just be such a love. Like, I just feel like humans would be more hiking. There would be more collaboration of ideas and of exciting things, of innovations. There would be more people using their healing abilities like intuitiveness, talking to spirits, mediums, psychics, visionaries, right? And I think, just kind of really quick talking about, when somebody goes into a psychotic break, what if that psychotic break was just because their soul was hurting so bad and they need a redirection? They're probably not crazy. Their soul's hurting. And that's what I've come to the conclusion every time I've had psychotic breaks. It's because my soul no longer wanted to be in that situation. And I think if we had the availability of psychedelics, more people that might have, although it's contraindicated in schizophrenia, we have a higher remission rate, like in India and Africa, of schizophrenia because they treat it with holistic modalities rather than shoving medications at it. And they are sometimes often viewed as shamans. like, like they sometimes go sit with monks and advise monks, right, in their schizophrenic state. And so, I think the world would just be such a cool place as I've seen it in the underground, as I've seen it with working with individuals that do microdosing or all these other cool plant medicines that we have all over the world. But yeah, my heart glows when I think about that because it's just such a lovely state, we're one with the earth then. And we've just gotten so far separated from self that this is why we have racism. This is why we have fights. This is why people are against each other. This is why people can't communicate or collaborate because we've gotten so disconnected from oneself. So ultimately, I see a world in the future where we are connected as a human collective and we are actually helping each other. And I'm going to cry because that's what I imagine. So So thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love for you to share for listeners who want to follow your work, get in touch, or learn. For all the nurses. We have lots and lots of nurses. Yeah. We love you in our community. Yes. Hi, everybody. They're going to be so thrilled to find you and learn of your work. So if you could let everybody know where to find you and where to go, and we'll also drop those into the show notes too.
Yeah, right on. Yeah. So School of Modern Nursing, schoolofmodernnursing.com, School of Modern Nursing on all the socials. So you can find me there. It's just Emily Knife on LinkedIn. Just started a new account, so might find that I have a little bit of followers, but don't worry about that. The information is still pertinent, so you should still follow along. But yeah, know that there's another nurse just like you that wanted to raise their consciousness, raise their vibe, raise their frequency. I'm here, and I'm here for you. So excited to meet you all when you come into any of our courses or programs, or just shoot me a message and we can vibe, have a meeting, and see how I can help you the best.
Thank you so much, Emily. Yeah, thank you. And thank all of you so much for listening today. We look forward to seeing you back in just a couple weeks. Bye, everybody. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Microdosing for Healing podcast. Are you ready to take the next step? Please visit us at microdosingforhealing.com to access our free Microdosing 101 workshop. In it, you'll learn more about our diverse community, our supportive group programs, and discover if earth medicine practice might be right for you. See you in the next episode.